When Ivy steps into the Blackthorn Mansion, a dark mystery unfolds, revealing her mother's hidden past and an ancient curse that only she can break. But what will Ivy sacrifice to save both worlds? Ivy's heart pounded in her chest as she stood before the towering gates of the Blackthorn Mansion, the cold night air biting at her skin. She had walked for hours through the foggy, moonlit streets, her worn shoes tapping faintly on the cobblestone paths. Her mother's fever burned hotter than ever back home, and the small handful of silver coins she had earned from selling flowers would do little to ease her pain. But Ivy had to try. She had no other choice. Behind the gates loomed the mansion, a place of legend, whispered about in the townsfolk's hushed tones. The Blackthorn Mansion, home to the Immortal Wolf King, the man the elders spoke of in warning, the ruler of the dark woods who could bend the beasts and the very land itself to his will. The man whose eyes, it was said, could freeze you in place with a single glance. But tonight, Ivy was desperate. She pressed her trembling hand against the cold iron bell, the thick rune embedded in the stone giving a faint pulse under her fingers. She was only a child, alone in the dark, but she had nothing left to lose. A long, drawn-out silence followed. Then a voice, deep and chilling, cracked through the air like the sound of ice breaking on a frozen lake. "Who dares to call on Blackthorn after nightfall?" The voice was commanding, but it held a note of curiosity, as if it had not expected anyone to answer the call. Ivy's throat was dry, but she gathered her strength and replied, My name is Ivy, sir. I am selling flowers, night-blooming roses, the kind that open under the moonlight. Would you like to buy some?" She couldn't believe the words had left her mouth. Her stomach growled in protest, but her heart was too full of hope to worry about her hunger. There was a long pause. Then, in a voice softer and almost intrigued, the Wolf King spoke again. "How much for all of them?" Ivy's eyes brightened, her grip tightening on the basket she clutched in her hands. 3 roses for a silver coin, or the whole basket for 5. I promise they are very fresh." There was another moment of silence, one so heavy that Ivy thought the gate would never open. She began to turn, ready to leave the cold stone and walk away into the night. But then the gate groaned loudly, like the yawning of a great beast, and slowly creaked open, inch by inch. Standing before her was a man whose presence made the air itself feel colder. He was tall, with a crown of iron thorns that seemed to shimmer with a dark, ominous light. His skin was as pale as the moon, and his eyes, those deep, burning eyes, glowed like embers in the night. This was Lorcan Blackthorn, the Wolf King. But Ivy did not know his name yet. The king regarded Ivy with a look that sent a shiver down her spine. But his gaze softened, as if something deep within him stirred at the sight of this small, trembling girl. She felt a strange pull, as though the weight of the world rested on her shoulders, and yet his sorrow was palpable. The silence between them stretched, filled with unspoken words, before Lorcan finally spoke. "Come inside, child," he said, his voice much gentler than she expected. "You're not safe out here in the cold. I'll buy all your roses, but I would prefer you come in and warm yourself first." Ivy hesitated. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind. Never go into the homes of strangers, especially not those who belong to the old stories. But there was something in his eyes, something lonely and sorrowful, that made her pause. "All of them?" Ivy asked in a whisper. "All of them," Lorcan replied, his eyes scanning her worn dress and tired face. He reached into his cloak, but then stopped. "When was the last time you ate, child?" Ivy's stomach answered for her with a loud growl, and she blushed furiously, avoiding his gaze. Lorcan's expression softened, and with a single nod, he stepped aside. "Come in," he said. "I will get you something warm to eat, then we'll talk." As Ivy stepped through the gate, the mansion loomed ahead of her, like a fortress carved from the shadows. The courtyard beyond was eerie, its dry fountains and twisted black roses bathed in the dim light of the moon. Every step she took felt like an echo, the sound swallowed by the stone walls, as if the mansion itself was waiting for something. And that's when she saw it, on a pedestal near the grand staircase. A portrait illuminated by candlelight. Her heart stopped. There, in the grand frame, was her mother. But this was not the sick, pale woman Ivy had known. This woman, dressed in a gown of midnight silk, seemed strong and vibrant, as though time had no claim on her. Ivy stepped forward, her feet moving before she could stop them. She touched the frame with trembling fingers and whispered, "That's my mom." The words hung in the air, and Lorcan, who had been standing silently behind her, froze. His lips parted as if he had forgotten how to breathe. His eyes were wide, and for the first time, the mask of a king slipped. There was recognition, fear, something that Ivy could not understand, but Lorcan did not speak. Not yet. His gaze lingered on Ivy, his eyes, those ember eyes, burning with something she couldn't quite name. He stood still, as if caught between a decision he had never planned for and a fate that had suddenly caught up with him. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. Instead, a long, strained silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as if time itself had stopped, waiting for him to find the right words. Ivy stood frozen, her small fingers still resting on the gilded edge of the frame. Her heart was hammering against her chest, the revelation too surreal to fully grasp. There was no mistaking it. The woman in the portrait was her mother. The same soft smile, the same dark eyes. But this woman, this version of her mother, looked nothing like the sickly woman Ivy had known for most of her life. No, this woman radiated strength and beauty, standing proud in a gown of midnight silk, as if she had never known the weight of illness, as if she had never been a prisoner of her own memories. And here, in this vast, eerie mansion, Ivy had stumbled upon something she was never meant to find. If you're hooked, hit subscribe. Finally, Lorcan spoke, his voice so quiet that it felt like the words themselves were made of shadows. "You were never supposed to see that." His tone was heavy, almost regretful, and Ivy felt a shiver crawl up her spine. "Who are you?" Ivy's voice cracked as she finally found the strength to speak, though she wasn't sure if it was from fear or the weight of the truth she was now facing. "Why is my mom's picture here? Why was she—" She couldn't finish the sentence, the words too painful to say. Lorcan took a slow step toward her, his footsteps echoing through the cavernous hall. He didn't answer her immediately. Instead, his gaze turned distant, as if he were trying to sort through the tangled web of memories he had locked away for far too long. "Your mother," he began, his voice heavy with the weight of unspoken years, "was someone I once knew, someone I loved, a love that has haunted me for centuries." He paused, his gaze never leaving the portrait, as if afraid to meet Ivy's eyes. "She was taken from me, and from you, by the curse that binds me." Ivy blinked in confusion. "What curse?" she asked, her voice trembling with both fear and curiosity. Lorcan looked at her then, his expression softening, though the sadness in his eyes remained. "I am the Wolf King, Ivy, and like all kings in my family, I am cursed to carry a terrible burden." He took another step toward her, his voice lowering, as if speaking of this curse drained him. "Every full moon, I transform into a beast, a creature of uncontrollable power, a wolf so fierce and wild that even I can't tame it. I am bound by this curse, trapped in a form I can neither escape nor control." Ivy felt a cold shiver ripple through her, but she didn't look away. She wanted answers, and the king was offering them, whether she was ready to hear them or not. "Why? Why are you telling me this?" Ivy whispered, her hand still resting on the frame, unable to look away from the portrait. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together the fragments of truth Lorcan was sharing. What does this have to do with my mother? Lorcan took a deep breath, his eyes flicking to the portrait again, his gaze haunted. Your mother was not just any mortal woman, Ivy. She was chosen. She was always meant to be part of this story, of my story. He closed his eyes briefly, and for a moment, Ivy saw a flicker of something almost human in him, a vulnerability that didn't belong in the creature before her. Lila and I. We were bound by something stronger than love. We were bound by fate. Ivy's heart skipped a beat. Bound by fate? She repeated, trying to wrap her mind around the words. You loved her? Lorcan nodded slowly, a bitter smile tugging at the corner of his lips. More than I should have. More than a king of my kind should ever love a mortal. His voice dropped lower, carrying a weight of ancient grief. But I made a promise to her. A promise to protect her, even if it meant keeping her away from me. And I failed her. Ivy felt her chest tighten. The bitterness in his voice was palpable, like a wound that had never healed. She could see it now, the sorrow that had haunted his every step, the loneliness that had been carved into his immortal soul. And it dawned on her that the pain wasn't just because of the curse, it was because of her mother. It was because of the love they had shared, a love that had been torn apart by forces neither of them could control. What happened to her? Ivy whispered, her voice raw with emotion. Why did she leave? Lorcan's gaze turned distant again, and for a moment he seemed lost in his own thoughts, trapped in a memory that he had never been able to escape. Your mother didn't leave me willingly, Ivy, he said quietly. The curse, the council, forces beyond our control tore her away from me. They took her memories, erased her past, and forced her to live a life she didn't choose. They knew that she carried something precious within her, something that was both a gift and a curse. They feared what she could become, what you could become. Ivy's heart raced. Me? What do you mean? What I could become? Lorcan turned his gaze back to her, his expression darkening. The curse that binds me is tied to blood, Ivy, to family. And you, your bloodline, your mother's blood, has a power that the council has feared for centuries. They knew that one day someone would come to break the curse, to undo the shackles of immortality that hold us both. He stepped closer, his voice lowering to a whisper, and they feared that person would be you. Ivy felt a chill crawl down her spine. Me, she whispered, but I don't have any power. I'm just a girl. Lorcan's gaze softened, and for the first time since she'd entered his mansion, there was a flicker of tenderness in his eyes. You are much more than that, Ivy. Your mother knew it, even before I did. You were always meant to be the key to breaking this curse, to breaking me. The weight of his words sank in slowly, like the cold realization of a truth she wasn't ready to face. I'm the key, she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. But I don't understand. How can I help you? Lorcan paused, looking at her with a mixture of sorrow and hope. You've already begun, Ivy. By being here. By discovering the truth about your mother, about the bond we share. He stepped back slightly, his expression softening even further. I have lived for centuries, Ivy, and in all that time I have known nothing but loneliness. My family, my bloodline, the curse that binds me, all of it has kept me isolated. But you are the only one who can free me. And in doing so, you can free yourself as well. Ivy's thoughts were a whirlwind, each new revelation spinning faster than she could absorb. Her mother, the curse, the prophecy, her connection to Lorcan, all of it was too much to comprehend in one moment. But something in her, something deep within her, stirred with the knowledge that she was now tied to this world in ways she couldn't escape. I don't know what to do, she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know if I can help you. Lorcan reached out, his hand gentle but firm as he placed it on her shoulder. You can, Ivy. You already have. His voice dropped to a soft murmur. You are stronger than you know, and together we can end the curse. We can change everything. But even as he spoke, Ivy could feel the weight of the decision that lay ahead of her. She was no longer just a girl looking for answers. She was the key to a fate that had been sealed long before she was born, and whether she was ready or not, her journey had only just begun. Ivy stood frozen in place, her fingers still trembling on the edge of the ornate portrait. Lorcan Blackthorn's words echoed in her mind, the weight of them sinking deeper with every passing second. You are the key. What did that mean? How could she be the key to breaking a centuries-old curse that had bound a king to the shadows? The truth felt impossible, like the whispers of old legends that had no place in the world she had known. She turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. What do you mean, I'm the key? Her voice wavered, but there was no denying the urgency in her tone. She needed answers. I don't understand. I've been nothing but a poor girl selling flowers to survive. How could I possibly have any connection to this curse? Lorcan's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, Ivy could see the centuries of pain and loneliness that lived behind his immortal eyes. He took a step closer, his movements slow, deliberate, as if he were afraid that any sudden movement might shatter the fragile trust between them. You are connected, Ivy, in ways far beyond what you can comprehend. His voice was low, but there was an undeniable sadness in it, like the echo of a lost love that had never been fully let go. Your mother, Lila, she was never meant to live a simple life, not with the blood that runs through her veins, and neither were you. Ivy swallowed hard. But why? Why didn't she ever tell me about you, about this? She gestured around the grand hall, her eyes widening as they landed on the portrait again. Why was she never in this world, with you? Why did I never know any of this? Lorcan stepped back, rubbing a hand over his face as though the memory he was about to share was something he had avoided for far too long. Because, Ivy, your mother made a choice, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. She chose to walk away from everything. From me, from this life, from the prophecy that tied her to this cursed existence. She chose you, and in doing so, she kept you safe, but she also kept you hidden. Ivy blinked, confusion sweeping over her like a sudden storm. Hidden? From what? From you? From this? She didn't understand. The words were too heavy, too tangled. There were too many pieces, and she couldn't fit them together. Lorcan's jaw tightened, and he exhaled slowly, as if steeling himself for something painful. You see, Ivy, I didn't tell you the whole story about your mother. I couldn't, because even now, I'm not sure you'd believe it. He paused, the silence between them thick with the weight of unspoken truths. But you have a right to know. The night I met your mother, it wasn't just a coincidence. It was fate. Ivy's heart skipped a beat. Fate, she whispered. What do you mean by that? Lorcan's eyes grew distant, as if he were lost in the memory of the past. It was the night of the full moon, he began, his voice distant and almost reverent. I was hunting, as I always did. The curse I bear is tied to the moon, to its cycle. Every full moon, I am forced to transform into something else. A beast, a creature of the night. He paused, as though the weight of his own words were still too much to bear. That night, I wandered into the shadow forest, a place where even the bravest of creatures dare not go. It was there that I found her. Ivy listened intently, her breath caught in her chest. What happened? She asked, her voice barely audible. Lorcan's lips curled into something like a sad smile. I never thought I'd meet someone like her. Your mother, Ivy, she was out there in the dark, alone. She was gathering herbs under the moonlight. Moonloom, a rare flower that only blooms in the presence of the full moon. I thought she was a vision at first, No mortal would be foolish enough to wander so deep into the forest, not with the wolves, not with the dangers that lurk in the night. Ivy shivered. So, what happened? She asked again, feeling a strange sense of anticipation. I saved her, Lorcan said, his voice tight with the memory, from a pack of dire wolves that had been stalking her. But instead of fear, she laughed. Laughed as though I were the one who needed saving, and told me I looked too grim for someone who had just done a good deed. A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips, but it was quickly gone. That was the beginning, Ivy. That was when the bond between us was formed, whether we wanted it or not. Ivy's mind spun. So, you and my mom, you met in the forest. But if she was with you, why did she leave? Her voice trembled with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Why didn't she ever tell me about this? About you? Lorcan's expression darkened, his face tightening with regret. Your mother and I had a love unlike any other, Ivy. But the world we lived in, the lives we led, were never meant to coexist. I am a creature of the night, and she was mortal. In the end, our worlds were too different, too far apart. He paused, as if the pain of the memory was still too fresh. But there was more. After we met, we began to meet in secret, under the cover of night, where no one could see us. Your mother taught me about the world of mortals, and I shared with her the ancient knowledge of my kind. We fell in love, Ivy, but then came the prophecy. Ivy's mind raced, but she couldn't make sense of it all. Prophecy? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lorcan nodded, his eyes darkening. Yes. A prophecy that foretold the coming of a child born from both our bloodlines. A child who would be the bridge between the mortal world and the immortal world. That child, Ivy, was always meant to be you. Ivy's heart stopped. Me, she breathed. I don't understand. Why am I part of this prophecy? Why was I hidden from you? Why did my mother never tell me? Lorcan closed his eyes as though he were bracing for the weight of the next words. Because, Ivy, the prophecy was not just about you. It was about breaking the curse that has kept me trapped for centuries. The curse that forces me to become a wolf every full moon. Your mother knew that you were the one who could break it. But when she realized what it would mean for you, for both of you, she made the hardest choice she could. She left me, and she kept you hidden. Ivy's mind reeled. Her heart was racing, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. But why? Why did she leave me? Why didn't she ever tell me the truth? Because, Ivy, Lorcan said, his voice thick with emotion. The truth was too dangerous. If the Council of Immortals found out about you, about what you could do, they would have taken you from her. They would have used you to control me, to use the prophecy for their own gain. He paused, his voice dropping to a near whisper. And so, she kept you hidden. She kept you away from me, away from the prophecy, away from the world you were meant to change. Ivy felt as though the ground had been ripped from beneath her. The weight of her mother's decision, the choices that had been made for her. It all felt too much to comprehend. So, what now? Ivy asked, her voice barely audible. What happens now that I know the truth? Lorcan's gaze softened, but there was an edge of something ancient in his eyes. Now, Ivy, you must choose. You are the key to breaking the curse. You are the bridge between the mortal world and the immortal world. But you must decide if you will help me, or if you will let this curse continue to destroy everything we once hoped for. Ivy stood frozen, her mind swirling with the enormity of it all. She had been living in a world of shadows, never knowing the truth about her mother, her bloodline, or the prophecy that had shaped her life. But now, standing before Lorcan, she understood one thing with terrifying clarity. Whatever choice she made, it would change everything. Ivy stood in the grand hall, her mind still reeling from the revelations Lorcan had shared. The weight of everything. The curse, her mother's hidden past, the prophecy, pressed down on her shoulders like an unyielding stone. The room around her felt both vast and claustrophobic, the walls closing in as the truth settled within her like a cold, heavy fog. She glanced at the portrait again, her mother's face staring back at her. How had she never known? How could the woman who had raised her in the small, quiet world of their village have hidden this truth from her? The power, the history, the dangerous prophecy that tied her to Lorcan Blackthorn, a king who had lived for centuries in a world of shadows. Your mother knew, Ivy. Lorcan's voice cut through her thoughts, his words like a ripple in the stillness. She knew what you were, what you would one day become. Ivy turned toward him, her heart pounding. What do you mean by that? Her voice was steady, but inside, everything was unraveling. Lorcan stepped closer, his presence so overwhelming that Ivy felt herself retreating within. His eyes, still burning like embers in the dim light, softened ever so slightly as he gazed at her. You carry more than your mother's love within you, he explained quietly. You carry her power, the abilities she tried to suppress. The bloodline you are born into is not simply mortal, Ivy. You are a bridge between the mortal world and the world of immortals, between light and darkness. Your mother's abilities were always meant to pass down to you. You are the key to breaking the curse that binds me. Ivy's head spun, the words not fully sinking in. But I don't have any powers. I'm just a girl. Lorcan interrupted softly, but there was no cruelty in his tone. No, Ivy, you are far more than that. Your mother knew it. She tried to protect you from it, but it was never meant to be hidden forever. The prophecy has always pointed to you. The weight of his words settled heavily in Ivy's chest. What powers? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What exactly do you mean? Lorcan's gaze turned distant, his face etched with an expression that could only be described as both sorrowful and resigned. I'll show you, he said finally, but it won't be easy. The night was creeping closer, the moon already beginning to rise, casting a silvery light over the land outside. Lorcan led Ivy through the grand hall, down a long corridor lined with old tapestries and portraits, until they reached a large stone door at the end. The air here felt different, cooler, heavier, as though something ancient and untamed had been waiting in this space for centuries. Lorcan pushed open the door, and Ivy followed him into the chamber beyond. Inside, there was a circular space, the walls lined with shelves filled with ancient books and artifacts, all steeped in dark magic and forgotten lore. At the center of the room was a large stone basin filled with water, shimmering under the light of the candles scattered around the room. The basin looked like something out of a forgotten ritual, its edges carved with symbols Ivy didn't recognize. This is where the transformation begins, Lorcan explained, his voice low and almost reverent. He turned to face her. I need you to understand, Ivy. What you're about to witness is not just a change in form, it is the very essence of my curse. It is the beast I become every full moon. Ivy's breath caught in her throat. What do you mean, the beast? Her voice trembled. Lorcan's gaze darkened. I am no longer fully human during the full moon. I become a wolf, fierce, untamable. The curse controls me, forces me into a form that I cannot escape. This is the price I've paid for immortality. His voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible. This is the price I've paid for failing to protect your mother. Ivy stood in stunned silence. She had heard the legends, the rumors of creatures who could change shape, but she had never imagined it could be real, never imagined that the man standing before her could become something so monstrous. Please, she said, her voice shaky. What do I need to do? Lorcan reached out, taking her hand gently in his. His skin was colder than she'd expected, but there was no malice in the touch. You must witness this, Ivy. You must see the truth for yourself. Only then will you understand what your role in all this truly is." With that, he turned toward the basin, kneeling down in front of it. He closed his eyes, his breathing slow and steady. The room grew darker, the shadows in the corners of the chamber stretching toward him like something alive. Ivy could feel the temperature drop, and with it, the weight of the curse that Lorcan had carried for centuries. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled from deep within his chest. His body began to shift, contorting in ways that made Ivy's breath catch in her throat. She watched, transfixed, as his bones seemed to crack and elongate. His skin stretched, his clothes tearing as fur sprouted along his limbs, covering him in a thick midnight coat. His face shifted, his features warping into a snout, his eyes glowing with an unnatural, fiery light. The transformation was both horrifying and mesmerizing, and Ivy could do nothing but watch as Lorcan became something else. Something wild, something far beyond human. The Wolf King stood before her, towering and fearsome, his massive form filling the room, his eyes, still burning with that same ember glow, locked onto Ivy, a silent plea within them. She could feel the power of the beast, the raw energy of the curse that bound him. It was more than just physical, it was a force of nature, something untamable and ancient. For a moment, Ivy felt a surge of terror course through her, but it was quickly replaced by something else, something stronger. She wasn't afraid, not of him. She was afraid of the truth, afraid of what this curse meant for her mother, for the future. She took a step forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Lorcan, what happens now?" The wolf growled softly, but there was no malice in the sound. It was more a rumbling of the earth itself, as if the very forest outside had come alive. His eyes never left hers as he took a step toward her, lowering his head slightly, as though offering her the chance to approach. "I will remain like this until dawn," he said, his voice low, though tinged with something almost sorrowful. "The curse controls me. It has always controlled me. But with you, Ivy, with you, there is hope. There is a chance to break free." Ivy swallowed hard, stepping closer, though every instinct told her to run. "How? How can I break this curse? How can I help you?" Lorcan's eyes softened, and for a moment, Ivy saw a glimmer of the man he had once been. "You must embrace your heritage, Ivy. Your mother's bloodline carries a power that can break the chains of this curse. But you must be willing to accept it. You must be willing to become the bridge between the mortal and immortal worlds. You are the key to it all." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint rustle of Lorcan's fur and the distant howling of the wolves outside. Ivy stood still, her heart racing, the enormity of her role settling heavily on her shoulders. She had always thought she was just a poor girl, nothing special, nothing more than someone who had to fight for every scrap of food. But now she was part of something much bigger. She had inherited her mother's powers, powers that had been hidden, suppressed, but now were awakening inside her. And in that moment, Ivy knew that her life would never be the same again. The night stretched endlessly, its heavy silence only broken by the soft crackling of the hearth in the corner of the room. Ivy sat on the edge of a chair, her legs pulled close to her chest, trying to process everything Lorcan had revealed to her. Her mother's hidden past, the prophecy that had always loomed over her, like a shadow waiting to take shape. The curse that bound Lorcan to a life of loneliness, forcing him to transform into a beast every full moon. And now, the truth, that she was the key to ending it all. "I don't understand," Ivy whispered, staring into the fire. The flames flickered and danced, but her mind was elsewhere. She felt like a part of her had been torn away, leaving her exposed and raw. "How can I be the one to change everything?" Lorcan, standing by the window, his silhouette framed by the moonlight, turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, the usual mask of a king firmly in place. Yet there was something vulnerable about him now, something that had begun to emerge as they shared these painful truths. "You've always been the one, Ivy," Lorcan said softly, his voice carrying an unfamiliar gentleness. The prophecy speaks of a child born to break the curse. A child born of both mortal and immortal blood. That child is you. Ivy's heart raced, but she didn't look away. But why me? She asked, her voice tight with disbelief. Why couldn't it be someone else? Someone stronger, someone more ready. Lorcan stepped closer, his eyes narrowing with a sharp, intense focus. You are the balance, Ivy. The curse that binds me, that has kept our worlds divided, is a consequence of our differences. The immortal world, the world of darkness, and the mortal world. They can never truly coexist unless someone breaks the cycle. That someone is you. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. Lorcan's words, cryptic and impossible as they seemed, resonated deep within her. The balance. He had said it before. She looked at him, finally asking the question that had been burning in her mind. So, the prophecy isn't just about ending your curse. It's about saving both our worlds, isn't it? Lorcan nodded, his eyes burning with intensity. Yes. If you fail, both worlds will be consumed by the curse. The immortals will continue to rule through fear, their power growing unchecked, and the mortal world will fall to ruin. But if you succeed, if you fulfill the prophecy, you can break the chains that bind us all. A shiver ran down Ivy's spine as she tried to comprehend the enormity of what he was asking of her. She was the key. The fate of both the mortal and immortal worlds rested on her shoulders. But before she could fully absorb the weight of that responsibility, a knock sounded at the door. It was a soft, deliberate knock, one that was far too intentional to be a random visitor. Lorcan's expression hardened, the vulnerability from earlier slipping away. He crossed the room swiftly, his movements fluid and purposeful. Without a word, he opened the door to reveal a stranger standing in the dim hallway. The figure was cloaked, the hood drawn low over their face, casting their features in shadow. But Ivy could feel the weight of their presence even before they spoke. There was something unmistakably ancient about this person, something that hinted at power far beyond what Ivy could comprehend. I bring word from the council, the stranger said, their voice smooth, laced with a cool authority. The Council of Immortals knows of the prophecy. They know of the child. Ivy's stomach twisted at the mention of the council. She had heard whispers from Lorcan about them, immortal beings who governed the dark creatures of the world. And they weren't pleased with her being here. She could tell from the stranger's tone that they came with a warning. Lorcan stepped forward, his eyes narrowing, his body language tense. What do they want? He asked, his voice low and steady, but Ivy could sense the edge of unease beneath it. The stranger hesitated for a moment before answering. They want the child gone. They fear her power. They fear that, once the prophecy is fulfilled, they will lose their hold over this world. The stranger's eyes flickered to Ivy, and for a moment, Ivy felt their gaze pierce through her very soul. And they have sent me to make sure that does not happen. Ivy's breath caught in her throat, her chest tightening with fear. They want to kill me, she whispered. No, the stranger replied, shaking their head slowly. They do not seek your life, child. At least not yet. But they will stop at nothing to make sure the prophecy is never fulfilled, and if you do not comply, they will make sure you are silenced, one way or another. Ivy's mind whirled, her thoughts clashing together in a storm of confusion and fear. What are they going to do? She asked, her voice cracking under the weight of the question. Lorcan stepped in front of her, his body a shield, his posture unwavering. They won't touch her, he said firmly. Not while I stand here. The stranger's lips twisted into a thin smile. You stand between your world and the Council's Blackthorn, they said, their tone laced with something far more dangerous. But how long will that last? The prophecy cannot be stopped. The Council knows that, which is why they will do everything in their power to prevent it from coming true. They paused, letting the weight of their words settle. But the child must make a choice, just as your mother did, Blackthorn. Lorcan's gaze hardened, his eyes flashing with an ancient fire. What choice? The stranger raised their head slightly, as if they were finally going to reveal something important. The child must choose whether to accept her place in the prophecy or to fight against it. The prophecy is not just about breaking the curse. It is about the survival of both the mortal and immortal worlds. If she fails, both worlds will be doomed. Ivy's chest tightened as her thoughts raced. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't chosen any of it. But the truth was undeniable. The prophecy was about her ability to bridge two worlds, to break a curse that had held both realms captive for centuries. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why am I the one who can change everything?" The stranger turned their head slightly, their gaze sharp. "Because you are the only one who can stand between them. You are the only one who can break the curse that binds this world and the immortal world." Their voice dropped to a near whisper. "And if you fail, the Council will ensure your destruction. They will keep you from fulfilling your destiny, no matter the cost." Ivy's heart pounded in her chest. It felt as though the ground beneath her was crumbling away, leaving her with nothing but the weight of a fate she couldn't escape. And the truth was clear. The Council was watching. They had known about her from the very beginning, and now they would stop at nothing to keep her from fulfilling the prophecy. Lorcan's gaze turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Do you understand now, Ivy? This is why you must embrace your role. The prophecy is not just about me. It's about you, and about the survival of both our worlds." Ivy's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, confusion, anger, but also something else. A spark of something she couldn't quite define, something she couldn't ignore. She felt the weight of her destiny pressing down on her, but with it there was a strange, quiet strength that she hadn't known she possessed. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can be the one to save both worlds." Lorcan stepped forward, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to be ready, Ivy. You just have to choose. You don't have to fight alone. We can face this together." The stranger watched them both for a moment before turning toward the door. "The Council will not wait forever. You must act quickly, or the prophecy will be lost." With that, they disappeared into the shadows of the hallway, leaving Ivy and Lorcan alone with the weight of their choices. The mansion was quiet, save for the soft crackle of the fire in the hearth. But beneath the surface calm, Ivy could feel the tension thickening, like an unseen storm building in the distance. The air around her felt heavier, charged with something she couldn't quite place. Lorcan had been quiet ever since the stranger had left, and Ivy couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something that would change everything. It didn't take long for her suspicions to be confirmed. A knock at the door, sharp, deliberate, and heavy with purpose. Ivy's pulse quickened as she exchanged a glance with Lorcan. He had told her that the Council would not wait forever, but she hadn't expected them to make their move so soon. Lorcan stood, his dark figure looming in the doorway as he made his way across the room, his every step a silent echo in the large chamber. Ivy remained frozen in place, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. What would happen now? What were the Council's emissaries going to do? Lorcan opened the door, and two figures stepped inside, their dark cloaks trailing behind them like shadows. They were tall, their faces obscured by hoods, but their presence was undeniable. Their energy was cold, distant, and Ivy immediately felt the weight of their power. These were no ordinary visitors. These were agents of the Council. "Kael Blackthorn," one of the emissaries spoke, his voice deep and measured, like the rumble of distant thunder. "The Council has sent us to deliver a message. You are to relinquish the child, Elara, to us. Her existence, her very bloodline, poses a direct threat to our power. We cannot allow the prophecy to come to fruition." Ivy felt the blood drain from her face. The prophecy. The words hit her like a tidal wave, crashing against her resolve, pulling her under. The prophecy that had haunted her dreams, the prophecy that tied her to Lorcan, was now the very thing that the council was determined to prevent. "She will not go with you," Lorcan's voice rang out, strong and unwavering. The coldness in his tone was the only indication that he was not at all surprised by their visit. He turned his gaze to the emissaries, his eyes darkened with an intensity that Ivy had never seen before. "I will protect her, at all costs." The emissary that had spoken sneered, a slight twitch in the corner of his lips. "You are defying the council, Blackthorn. Do you truly believe that you can stand against us? We are the rulers of the Immortals. You are but a single, cursed king, one who will be powerless in the face of our wrath." Lorcan's posture stiffened, his jaw tightening. "I will not be intimidated by you or by the council's threats. Elara is not a pawn in your game of power. She is the key to breaking the curse that has shackled me, and I will not hand her over to you." Ivy felt the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Every word, every glance, felt like a battle in itself. She could feel Lorcan's anger, his refusal to back down, but she also felt something else, something more powerful. She felt his desperation. "Elara does not belong to the council," Lorcan continued, his voice low but fierce. "She is not their tool, nor mine. She is her own person, with her own path to follow. And I will not allow anyone to take that from her." The emissaries exchanged a look, their eyes narrowing. The one who had spoken earlier stepped forward, his presence as cold as the winter wind. "You are making a grave mistake, Blackthorn," he said, his voice laced with contempt. "The council will not tolerate defiance. If you refuse to comply, we will take matters into our own hands. You will regret this decision." Ivy's heart raced as she stepped forward, the words swirling in her mind, crashing against her chest. This is it. This is the moment when everything changes. Her eyes flicked to Lorcan, her protector, the man who had shared his cursed existence with her, who had shown her the world beyond her wildest dreams. But she knew deep down that the decision was not his to make alone. It was hers. "I don't want to be a part of this," Ivy spoke, her voice shaking as the weight of the council's threat settled into her bones. "I don't want to be the key to this prophecy. I don't want to be the reason for this war." Lorcan's eyes softened as he turned to face her, his expression a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "You have no choice, Ivy. This is your destiny. The council's power has ruled over both worlds for too long. But if you choose to embrace your role in the prophecy, we can break the curse and bring balance. We can end the suffering." Ivy shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Lorcan stepped closer to her, his hands gently cupping her face. "You are stronger than you realize. You carry the blood of your mother, the woman who chose to protect you, even when it meant sacrificing everything. You have her strength, her courage, and you have my strength, Ivy. I will stand with you, no matter what." For a moment, Ivy just stood there, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of her decision hung in the air, suffocating her, but she knew what she had to do. She could run from this fate, hide in the shadows, but it would never truly go away. She had to face it. "I will fight," she whispered, her voice steadying with the newfound strength of her resolve. "I will not let the council control me. I will not let them take everything from me. I will fight for my mother, for myself, for both worlds." Lorcan's eyes softened, and he nodded. "Then we will fight together." The emissary who had spoken earlier seemed to notice the shift in the air. The quiet tension that had been hanging between them now crackled with something far more dangerous. He straightened, his eyes narrowing as he glared at Lorcan. "So be it, Blackthorn," he spat. "You have chosen your path, but you will not win. The council will come for you, for her, and when they do, nothing will stop them. Lorcan's gaze was unwavering as he stared down the emissary. We'll see about that. As the emissaries turned to leave, their footsteps echoing down the hall, Ivy felt the gravity of her decision settle in. There was no turning back now. The prophecy, the curse, the council, it was all part of her life now, whether she was ready for it or not. But one thing was certain. She would no longer stand on the sidelines. She was ready to fight. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on Ivy's chest as she stood in the dimming light of the great hall. She had chosen her path, but the war had only just begun. The council would come, and they would stop at nothing to prevent the prophecy from coming true. Ivy could feel the storm on the horizon, could sense the tension in the air, and as the doors closed behind the emissaries, the reality of what lay ahead sank into her heart. She was no longer just Ivy. She was the key to the future, whether she wanted to be or not, and with that knowledge, she braced herself for the battle of wills that was about to unfold. The air outside was cool, a thin mist creeping along the ground as the pale moonlight bathed the world in an ethereal glow. Ivy stood at the threshold of Lorcan's mansion, her heart still heavy with the weight of the decisions that had been made. The threat of the council loomed over her like an impending storm, but she couldn't ignore the growing curiosity within her. Curiosity about her mother, about the past that had been hidden from her for so long. Lorcan had promised to reveal the truth, but tonight, as he beckoned her to follow him into the night, Ivy couldn't shake the feeling that what she was about to uncover would be the final piece of the puzzle. This was the moment when everything, her mother's disappearance, her own destiny, the prophecy, would finally make sense. "Come with me, Ivy," Lorcan said softly, his voice carrying an unspoken invitation. His ember eyes flickered in the dim light as he turned toward the door, gesturing for her to follow. "It's time you learned the truth about your mother and about the promise I made to her." Ivy nodded, her chest tightening with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She had lived her whole life without knowing the true story of her mother. And now, standing at the edge of a world she never thought possible, the truth seemed both too much to bear and too important to ignore. They stepped outside into the courtyard, the cold night air wrapping around them like a cloak. Lorcan led her toward a path that Ivy hadn't noticed before, a narrow, winding stone walkway that seemed to lead into the heart of the dark woods surrounding the mansion. The trees here were old, their branches twisting like gnarled fingers, and the ground beneath their feet was soft, as though the earth itself had been undisturbed for centuries. "Where are we going?" Ivy asked, her voice barely a whisper, as though the woods themselves might be listening. "To a place from the past," Lorcan replied, his voice distant as though the memory was still fresh in his mind. "A place where I made a promise, one that I've kept for far too long." As they walked deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to grow closer together, their dark forms looming over them like silent sentinels. The world around them felt different, older, more alive with the weight of memories that had been buried for centuries. Ivy could sense the pull of something ancient, something that had been waiting for her to arrive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of walking in silence, they arrived at a clearing. The moon hung low above them, casting a silvery light over the scene before them. At the center of the clearing stood a large, ancient tree, its bark twisted and scarred, its roots reaching deep into the earth. The tree seemed to pulse with energy, as though it were alive in a way that no ordinary tree could be. "This is where it all began," Lorcan said, his voice softer now, almost reverent. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the rough bark of the tree. "Your mother and I. We met here, in this very clearing, under the full moon." Ivy's breath caught in her throat. This was where it had all started, their story, her mother's hidden past, the curse that had bound Lorcan for centuries. She stepped forward, her heart pounding as she took in the sight of the tree, its twisted branches reaching up to the heavens as if they were trying to grasp something just out of reach. Your mother was not just anyone, Ivy, Lorcan continued, his gaze distant as he stared up at the tree. She was part of an ancient order, an order of women who had the power to break curses, to change the fates of kings. It was because of her connection to this order that I made my promise to her, to protect her, to keep her safe, no matter what. Ivy felt her knees weaken, and she leaned against the tree for support, the weight of Lorcan's words settling in. Your mother had power, Ivy. Power that could have changed everything. But the Council, the Immortals, feared that power. They saw her as a threat, as someone who could unravel everything they had worked for, everything they had built. Ivy shook her head, trying to process the revelation. My mother, she was part of a magical order, she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. Why didn't she ever tell me? Why did she hide all of this from me? Lorcan turned to her, his expression softening with a hint of regret. Because she knew the danger it would bring, Ivy. The Council would have done anything to keep her from fulfilling her role. They took her away from me, from you, because they feared the power she carried. They took her memories, erased everything she knew about me, about the Order, about you. Ivy's chest tightened. So, it wasn't her choice. She didn't leave me? Lorcan's gaze darkened. No. She was forced to forget. Forced to live a life that wasn't hers, with no memory of who she truly was. But she never stopped loving you, Ivy. That's what kept her going, and that's why she kept you hidden, even when it meant giving up everything she knew. The weight of Lorcan's words sank in, and Ivy felt a mixture of sorrow and anger rose within her. Her mother had been robbed of everything, her past, her memories, her love for Lorcan, and Ivy, in turn, had been robbed of the truth. For so long, she had lived with the illusion that her mother's illness and disappearance was simply the result of a cruel twist of fate. But now, standing here in the clearing, Ivy understood the truth. She was part of something much bigger than herself. She was part of a prophecy, a curse that had been set in motion long before her birth. And her mother's disappearance had been orchestrated by forces beyond her control. The Council, Ivy whispered, her voice thick with emotion. They took her memories, they erased everything, and now they're coming for me too. Lorcan nodded, his eyes flashing with a cold fury that Ivy had never seen before. They will stop at nothing to keep the prophecy from coming true. They want to maintain their power, to keep the immortal world in control. They will do everything in their power to prevent you from fulfilling your role. Ivy clenched her fists at her sides. I won't let them, she said, her voice filled with a determination she hadn't known she was capable of. I won't let them take my mother's legacy, or mine. I'll fight for the truth. I'll fight for both worlds. Lorcan's expression softened, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. You've already chosen, Ivy. And that is the first step toward breaking the curse, but there is one more thing you must understand. Ivy looked up at him, her heart pounding in her chest. What is it? Lorcan's gaze darkened as he stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. The prophecy is not just about breaking the curse. It's about uniting the mortal and immortal worlds. You, Ivy, are the bridge between the two. You are the key to changing everything. But that choice will not come without sacrifice. Ivy felt a shiver run down her spine. What kind of sacrifice? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lorcan met her gaze, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and resolve. The price of breaking the curse, of fulfilling the prophecy, is more than you can imagine. It will require everything, your strength, your heart, your very soul. But if you do not choose, if you refuse to accept your role, both worlds will fall. Ivy swallowed hard, the weight of her decision pressing down on her like a stone. I understand, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside her. I will do what I must. Lorcan nodded, his expression softening with approval. Then it begins, Ivy. The journey to break the curse, to unite the two worlds, begins with you, and I will stand by you, no matter the cost." With that, the two of them stood in the clearing, surrounded by the ancient trees, the weight of the past pressing in on them. The battle had only just begun, but Ivy knew that whatever happened next, she would face it head-on. Her mother's legacy was now hers to carry, and she would not let it be forgotten. The night was thick with tension as Ivy stood at the edge of the courtyard, the full moon casting a silvery light over the land. Every inch of the air around her felt heavy, as though the weight of destiny itself was pressing down upon her. Tonight was the night. The prophecy would either be fulfilled or shattered, and Ivy had never felt more unsure of herself, yet more resolute at the same time. Lorcan stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the dark horizon where the council's emissaries had been spotted gathering. She could feel the unease radiating off him, even though he didn't show it. He was a king, a creature of immortal power, but tonight was different. Tonight, everything hinged on Ivy's choice, her strength, and her willingness to face the truth of what lay before them. "The council will come for you, Ivy," Lorcan said quietly, his voice low but firm. "They will try to break you, to control you, but you must not let them. You are the key, the bridge between the worlds. If you stand strong, the curse will break, and everything will change." Ivy's heart pounded in her chest. She was the bridge, the child who could bring both the mortal and immortal worlds together, or tear them apart. The curse that had bound Lorcan, forcing him into the form of a beast every full moon, could only be broken by her. She had known this truth for some time, but now it was more real, more urgent than ever. She turned to Lorcan, her eyes meeting his with a clarity she hadn't felt before. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning within her. "I know what I have to do." Lorcan nodded, his eyes softening. "Then we face them together, Ivy. No matter the outcome." The council's presence loomed as they arrived at the gates of Lorcan's mansion, a dark and imposing figure standing before them. Ivy felt their power even before she saw them, an invisible force pressing in, an ancient weight that threatened to crush her, but she held her ground, every fiber of her being focused on the task ahead. The council's emissaries were a stark contrast to Lorcan's solitude, their figures cloaked in shadow, their faces hidden beneath hoods. They spoke in unison, their voices a cold, terrifying harmony. "You have broken the laws, Blackthorn," one of them declared, their voice sharp and commanding. "You have allowed this child to live. The prophecy cannot come to fruition. The mortal world and the immortal world must remain separate, as they have always been." Ivy stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "I will not surrender," she said, her voice clear and unshaken. "I am the key to ending this curse. I am the one who can break the chains that bind both worlds, and I will not let you take that away." The council's figures shifted, their presence growing more oppressive. "You are but a child," another voice sneered. "What do you know of the prophecy? What do you know of the forces that govern the immortal world?" Ivy's pulse quickened, but she did not falter. "I know enough," she said, her voice steady and filled with conviction. "I know that I am the one who can bring balance. I know that I am the one who can end this curse, not just for Lorcan, but for both worlds, and I know that I will not let you stop me." A moment of silence passed, thick and heavy, before the council spoke again. "Then you will face the consequences of your defiance, child," the lead emissary said, his voice cold and final. "We will do what must be done to preserve the old order." Lorcan stepped forward, his stance protective. "You will not harm her," he declared, his voice full of authority. "If it comes to war, then so be it, but Ivy will not be your prisoner." The council's emissaries turned their gaze to Lorcan, their eyes narrowing with disdain. "You think you can defy us, Blackthorn?" one of them hissed. "We are the Immortals. Your fate has already been sealed." But Ivy could feel the power stirring within her, a force she had only just begun to understand. She reached deep inside herself, drawing on the energy that had always been there, buried beneath the surface, hidden away by her mother's sacrifices and her own fear. Tonight, she would face the truth. And tonight, she would awaken the power she had inherited. The moon hung high above, its light illuminating the courtyard in an eerie glow. Ivy stepped forward, her eyes focused on the council's emissaries. "You think you control everything," she said, her voice now laced with the power of the prophecy. "But you don't. I am the bridge, the one who can unite the worlds. I will not be your puppet." She lifted her hand, and the air around her seemed to hum with energy. The ground beneath her feet trembled as the power within her surged, awakening fully for the first time. The sky above darkened, the moon's light intensifying, and the very earth seemed to respond to her call. A pulse of energy radiated from her, rippling outward like a wave, shaking the council's emissaries to their core. Lorcan watched in awe as Ivy's power unfolded before him. He had known she was the key, but seeing her truly embrace her heritage, seeing the potential that had always been hidden inside her, filled him with both pride and wonder. She was more than just a girl. She was the force that could change everything. The emissaries recoiled, their expressions filled with both fear and fury. "You dare defy the council?" one of them growled, stepping forward, but Ivy's power only grew stronger, the energy around her crackling with raw force. "I dare," Ivy said, her voice like a thunderclap, "and I will not be stopped." With a wave of her hand, the very air around the council's emissaries seemed to twist and bend, as though the world itself was bending to Ivy's will. The sky above darkened further, and the ground beneath them cracked open, revealing the raw energy of the earth itself. Ivy's power surged, a torrent of light and shadow coiling together, and the emissaries stumbled back, unable to withstand the force she commanded. "You are nothing," Ivy declared, her voice ringing out, filled with power and resolve. "You are just shadows, trying to control something that can never be contained." The emissaries faltered, their once imposing figures now shrinking in the face of Ivy's strength. They had underestimated her, underestimated the power of the prophecy, the power of the bridge between worlds. And in that moment, Ivy knew the truth. She had always been more than what the council had seen. She had always been the one destined to break the curse, to unite the worlds. With one final surge of energy, the emissaries were thrown back, their forms disintegrating into dust as Ivy's power ripped through the air. The curse, the chains that had bound Lorcan for centuries, began to unravel. Lorcan stepped forward, his eyes filled with both awe and gratitude. "You've done it, Ivy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You've broken the curse." Ivy stood tall, her chest rising and falling with the exertion of the battle she had just fought. But even as the council's emissaries disintegrated, even as the curse that had plagued Lorcan for centuries finally shattered, Ivy knew that the fight was far from over. The council would not give up easily, and there was still a choice to be made. But as the dust settled and the moonlight faded, Ivy felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her once again. The prophecy had been fulfilled, the curse broken. But the final piece of the puzzle had yet to fall into place. Ivy turned to Lorcan, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of everything she had just learned, everything she had just done. Lorcan's gaze softened as he stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch hers. "Now, Ivy, you must make your choice. The prophecy is fulfilled. The curse is broken. But there is one last thing, one final sacrifice." Ivy's heart clenched. She had always known that there would be a cost. "What sacrifice?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lorcan's eyes darkened. "You must choose, Ivy. You must choose between staying in the mortal world, the world you know, or joining me in the immortal realm. The prophecy was never just about breaking the curse. It was always about you, about your place in both worlds. Ivy's breath caught in her throat as the weight of her decision crashed down on her. She had always thought that the prophecy would be the end, but now, it felt like the beginning of something even bigger, something that would change her life forever. She looked at Lorcan, his expression filled with both hope and sadness. He had been bound to the curse for centuries, but now, with the curse broken, his world had opened up again. But Ivy's world was the mortal realm. The life she had fought for, the life she had known, was here in the world of humans. And yet, there was something inside her that pulled her toward him, toward the immortal world, toward a future that she had never imagined. The choice was hers, and it would be the hardest decision she had ever made. The night that had once seemed so full of darkness and uncertainty was now stretching toward the first light of dawn. Ivy stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the valley below, the cool wind brushing against her skin. She had made her decision, though it hadn't come easily, and the weight of it still clung to her heart like a heavy cloak. The curse had been broken. Lorcan Blackthorn, the immortal king cursed to become a wolf under the full moon, was no more. The chains that had bound him for centuries had dissolved, shattered by the power Ivy had awakened within herself. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but the question that lingered, heavy and unspoken, was what came next. Ivy turned to look at Lorcan, who stood beside her, watching the sunrise in silence. His once dark and intense gaze had softened, as if the release of his curse had freed not only his body, but his soul. His cloak, once a dark and imposing presence, now seemed lighter, the black fabric almost blending into the pale light of the new day. He was free, but the cost of that freedom was not without consequence. "Is this it?" Ivy asked, her voice quiet, yet strong, the question lingering between them. "Is the curse really gone?" Lorcan's eyes met hers, the deep ember-like glow still there, but with a gentler edge. "It is," he replied simply, his voice filled with both relief and sorrow. "The curse that bound me, the beast that controlled me, it's gone. I'm free." Ivy looked out across the horizon, her heart still heavy with the weight of her decision. She had done what no one had thought possible. She had shattered the curse, freed Lorcan, and altered the fate of both the mortal and immortal worlds. But now she had to choose between staying in the world she had known her whole life, or joining Lorcan in the immortal realm, where the world was far different from what she could ever have imagined. "You said I was the key," Ivy said softly, looking at Lorcan, the wind ruffling her hair. "But I don't know if I can leave. My life, my mother, it's all here. I don't know if I can turn my back on everything I've ever known." Lorcan nodded, stepping closer, his presence warm and steady beside her. "I know it's not an easy decision, Ivy. You've already given up so much, but I can't tell you what to choose. That choice belongs to you, and you alone." Ivy closed her eyes, the weight of her choice pressing in on her chest. The mortal world was all she had known. Her mother, the village, the quiet, simple life that had kept her grounded. But that world was also a prison for her mother, a place where she had been hidden away, her memories stolen by the council. Ivy had already given up so much, but the thought of leaving her old life behind, of leaving her mother behind, felt impossible. Just then, a familiar figure appeared behind them, walking up the path toward the cliff. Ivy's heart skipped a beat as she recognized her mother's silhouette. "Lila," Ivy whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Her mother, the woman who had always been there for her, the woman who had sacrificed so much, now stood before her, her face more alive than Ivy had ever seen it. Lila smiled softly, the smile of a woman who had been through so much, yet still had the strength to face the world with love in her heart. "I remember," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I remember everything, Ivy." Ivy's eyes filled with tears as she rushed to her mother, pulling her into an embrace. Lila held her tightly, as if she was afraid to ever let go. "I'm so sorry," Lila whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to leave you. I didn't mean to make you feel alone." "I know, Mom," Ivy replied, her voice muffled against Lila's shoulder. "I know now. The bond between mother and daughter had always been strong, but now, after all the years of confusion and separation, it felt unbreakable." Lila's memories had been restored, and with them, a new future began to unfold for both of them. Lorcan stood behind them, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were filled with something deeper, something that Ivy couldn't quite define. His hands clenched at his sides, as if holding on to something he couldn't quite let go of. But when Lila pulled away from the embrace and turned to face him, Ivy saw the shift in Lorcan's demeanor. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A flicker of something old, something painful, and something tender. "You," Lila said, her voice a mixture of awe and something else, something Ivy couldn't name. "You were the one who promised to protect me, weren't you? The one who saved me?" Lorcan nodded, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "I did," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I promised to protect you, Lila. And I failed you, but now you're free, and so am I." The silence between them was thick, filled with words that neither of them spoke, but Ivy could feel it, the past, the pain, the connection between them. They had been separated for so long, and yet the love that had once bound them had never truly faded. It had simply been hidden, buried beneath the layers of memory loss, of the curse, of the years that had passed. Lila turned to Ivy, her hand reaching out to gently touch her cheek. "You've done it, Ivy," she said softly, her voice filled with pride. "You've freed us both." Ivy's heart swelled with emotion as she looked at her mother, the woman who had given her everything, who had fought so hard to keep her safe. And now, they were both free. But there was still the question that loomed large over them. What would happen next? "I've done what I could," Ivy said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "But now, I have to decide. I have to choose between the mortal world and the immortal realm. I can't have both." Lila looked at her, her eyes filled with understanding. "You can have both, Ivy. You can choose the future you want, the future that is best for you. But whatever you choose, know that you will never be alone. You have us, always." Ivy felt the truth of her mother's words settle deep within her. She had always felt like she was living a life that wasn't her own, like she was trapped in a world that didn't fit her. But now, standing here with her mother and Lorcan, she realized that the choice didn't have to be one or the other. She could create her own future, a future where love and freedom weren't bound by prophecy or curse. "I've spent my whole life running from my destiny," Ivy said, her voice clear and confident. "But now, I'm ready to face it. I'm ready to choose my own path." Lorcan stepped forward, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You've already chosen, Ivy. You've chosen love, and that's more powerful than any curse or prophecy. You've broken the chains that bound us all, and now the future is yours to shape." Ivy turned to him, her heart racing as she realized the truth of his words. She had already broken the curse. She had already changed everything, and now it was time to create a future that was her own. The dawn light broke over the horizon, painting the world in shades of gold and rose. Ivy felt the warmth of the sun on her skin, the promise of a new day settling into her bones. The curse was broken, the prophecy had been fulfilled, and now the world, her world, was hers to shape.